Well, welcome everybody. This is Monique Smith. We spoke last week at this time, and we welcome to the first DCO. And for those of you that are just logging in, the brain teaser, what three-letter word best completes the below words? And the first person that got it correct was Michael. Good job, Michael. So the words that we have is carton, heart, earth, martyr, quarter, and the word start. Like I said, this is the first DCO, the first session of the Department of the Navy EEO program overview. Let me get this poll question up for you just a second. Okay, so my question to you is, how long have you been in the federal government? I'll give you a minute to answer that. Still fluctuating with our answers. Another few seconds. It appears that the majority of you have been in here between 0 and 5 years. All right. Okay, now I'm going to hand the mic over to Virgil White.
Welcome, everyone. Like she said, my name is Virgil White, and I want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about myself. Um, been in the federal government, I guess, a lot longer than some of you have. I've been in the EEO program for 11, 12 years on the civilian side and about a good 4 or 5 years on the military side. So I've seen both sides of the picture. I currently am a program manager with the Department of Navy EEO program. I pretty much back up the other program managers in the work that they do, but I also serve as a liaison between the major commands and the command deputy EEO officers, assisting them with issues and concerns that they have with their EEO program, and I also serve as somewhat of a part-time command deputy EEO officer for the Office of Human Resources here at OCHR. And with that, I am going to pass this over to Mr. Ed Cassian. He'll introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you're at. Um, like Virgil said, my name is Ed Castellon, and I am the Department of Navy Disability Program Manager, and I've been in that position for about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked here at OCHR as well in the complaints area. Prior to that, I was at with NAVAIR, the NAVAIR Weapons Division in Point Mugu in China Lake, where I was the formal complaints manager, ADR coordinator, Hispanic Employment Program manager, and I worked on the MD 715 and MD 714 prior to MD 715. Um, so, really, today we are going to, like the title suggests, this is an overview of the EEO program, and today we're going to hit some aspects of the EEO program. And in the next couple of sessions, we'll go through each part of the EEO program, not in a lot of detail. Again, it's an overview. Next month, when we conduct the 5-day sessions, we will go in depth into several of the major areas that you will probably be working on day to day. So just to cover the course objectives for this particular session, which are the ones in blue, we're going to define EEO, identify the basic EEO statutes, regulations, policy, and where to find them, and we'll describe the 6 essential elements, and we'll continue on in the next session, explaining the mission of the Dawn EEO program, describing the components that comprise the Dawn EEO program. And then in the third session, we will describe the roles and responsibility of EEO practitioners at every level, recognize the requirements of the MD-715 program assessment, and have a brief description on barrier analysis. We'll go much more in detail during the 5-day course. So just real quick, if you could tell us, what does EEO mean to you? If you could please type your answer in chat, and then we'll provide some feedback. So let's just take about a minute to do that. So if you do that, that'd be great. Thank you. Great, thank you very much. We've Virgil and I have kind of been going through these, and a trend that we see is fairness and equality for everyone, and that is an aspect of what EEO is. So that's good. I like the Dan, EEO is the law of the land. That's a good one. I like that. The part that was great. I think that was good. So, what is EEO? Equality of opportunity. We have here that's a system of laws, because there's multiple laws. There's a number of regulations that apply to it, and there's procedures established for the purpose of achieving equality of opportunity and removing barriers. And it is integrated throughout the employment cycle. It starts with, if you look at the wheel, it starts with recruitment, and it goes into hiring. But really, the main point to get from this slide is the purpose, which is achieving equality of opportunity and removal of barriers. I would argue that there are a number of people who have a different perception of what EEO is, and I would encourage you all, as you guys, for those of you who are going to become EEO specialists, I'm a big advocate of studying, reading, and one thing that you'll learn from us in the next few sessions is there's a lot of information out there on EEO. There's a lot of guidance out there on EEO. We're going to give you a little bit of a brief understanding of some of the resources that are available to you. But it's always nice, my opinion, of course, to start with the law itself and understand what Congress was trying to do when they passed some of the laws that are associated with EEO and that we try to enforce. And one of the laws, and it's kind of the big one, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself just to let you know, but it goes back to what is the purpose of EEO, and it's title, when you read Title VII, which is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, they have a quote well, there's a section, it's section 703J. Don't write it down. You guys don't need to just know what it means, not necessarily. I would encourage you all to read it, but you don't have to like memorize it by any means. But it really gets to what EEO is and what EEO is not, and some of the misperceptions that people have about EEO, and it clarifies a lot. And Section 703J states, nothing contained in this title, which would be Title VII, shall be interpreted to require any employer subject to this title to grant preferential treatment to any individual or to any group because of the race, color, religion, sex, or national origin of such individual or group on an account of an imbalance which may exist with respect to the total number or percentage of persons of any race, color, religion, sex, or national origin employed by an employer in comparison with the total number or percentage of such race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in any community, state, section, or other area, or in the available workforce in any community, state, section, or other area. In other words, what Title VII specifically prohibits is racial balancing or balancing because of religion or anything of that nature. Our role in EEO is to ensure equality of opportunity and to remove employment barriers that inhibit equality of opportunity for employees. Our job, if there is, to use the language from Title VII, which is an imbalance, today we would say we have a low participation rate of a particular group when we compare the Department of Navy population or the population of a major command or the population of a particular activity compared to the relevant civilian labor force or the labor force that's available to us to hire from. Our job is not, if there is a low participation, our job in EEO is not to move our participation up to the level of the civilian labor force. Our job is to understand why there's an imbalance, and if there's a barrier, to develop a plan to eliminate that employment barrier. So that's really the purpose of EEO. There's a very important case that, again, I would encourage everybody to read. It's a Supreme Court case, and it was one of the first cases that the Supreme Court looked at Title VII. And in that, they said, the objective of Congress in the enactment of Title VII is plain from the language of the statute. It was to achieve equality of employment opportunity and remove barriers. So when you think about what your role, for those of you who are going to be in EEO, what your role is to ensure equality of opportunity for all employees and to remove barriers that inhibit fair and equal treatment for everyone. So we'll just, I'll get off my soapbox for a little bit, but I just wanted to share that with you. Those of you who are going to be in the 5-day, I might bring out some additional quotes just for fun. So we'll go up to the next one, and this is kind of just, this slide gives an overview of federal statutory framework. When Congress passes a law, that law is codified in the United States Code, and the code is published, obviously, gives authority to um, for administrative agencies to issue codes of federal regulations, so administrative regulations, which provide a little bit more detail of what the statute means and how that administrative agency is interpreting the statute. For us in EEO, our administrative agency is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and we are essentially bound by their guidance and their regulation. In EEO, we're also impacted by executive orders. There's a number of executive orders which I will describe very briefly that impacts our work area. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, issues management directives to us. The two major management directives are Management Directive 715 on establishing a model EEO program, and Management Directive 110, which provides a lot of our guidance in regards to processing EEO complaints. We, in this office, also draft policy, which are found in the Civilian Human Resource Manual. We have a number of subchapters, which we'll also discuss very briefly, and that is Department of Navy policy. Every once in a while, we will issue guidance and advisory memorandums. The GAMs I've used them in the past to provide guidance and advice on issues that pop up that are important, that we want to get out to you quickly, and that at some point we'll probably include into a charm. It's just that at this point we wanted to get the information out to you quickly. So I'll mention at least one of those that we issued semi-recently. So the next part of our conversation, we're going to talk about a little bit about the various EEO statutes. So, but before we do that, I wanted to take a poll. I wanted to ask you guys a question. So we're going to bring up the poll question to see what you guys think on this. And essentially the question is, in what year was the first federal policy established prohibiting discrimination in federal employment on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin? So I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that. So if everybody could participate, that'd be great. Great. Thank you all for participating. And for those of you who I'll get to meet or I've already met, those of you who know me, you know, I do things that sometimes some people don't necessarily like to do. I enjoy reading EEO cases. I like looking at history, things of that nature, and you know, looking at the history of the part of you know, HR that I work in is something that I find very interesting. Look at not only cases, but some of the background on cases and things of that nature. And obviously, the history of EEO I find very interesting. And the answer to the question that I asked was actually 1948. And just the way, just to let you know, just one of the ways that at least the pattern that I've noticed in the way that laws develop, at least in this particular area, is that usually there's an executive order, and then subsequent to that executive order, Congress kind of comes along and subsequently creates a law. So it was actually under the Truman administration that the first the first policy in the federal government prohibiting discrimination on the basis of color, race, religion, and national origin was issued. And it's actually Executive Order 9980, which states, just to read kind of just the very top level summation of this executive order, was all personnel actions taken by federal appointing officials shall be based solely on merit and fitness, and such officers are authorized and directed to take appropriate steps to ensure that in all such actions there shall be no discrimination because of race, color, religion, or national origin. So the history of EEO as we know it begins in 1948. Interestingly enough, the executive order that was issued on the same date and that was the one right after this one was actually the desegregation of the armed forces. So if you guys are ever on Jeopardy, you guys know the answer. So subsequent to this executive order, there was a number of other executive orders. There were some executive orders issued in the 50s that came out, and then in 1963 was the Equal Pay Act. And the Equal Pay Act is a law that makes it illegal to pay different wages to men and women if they perform equal work in the same workplace. And the scope of the Equal Pay Act is very limited. It's pay, and it's only on the basis of sex, so between men and women. And the big law or statute that applies to us is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And this particular law makes it illegal to discriminate against someone on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin. All of the, just as a reference, all the laws prohibit reprisal against a person because the person complained about discrimination, filed a charge of discrimination, participated in an investigation, or any judicial or administrative proceedings regarding the EEO complaint. And also, it prohibits discrimination for opposition to make something illegal in the statute. So, Title VII is the law that most or all of the subsequent laws that are enforced by the EEOC and that we enforce in the EEO offices are derived from Title VII, have very similar language. Just as kind of another trivia question, if you're ever on Jeopardy, Congress in the 60s thought that the only reason that women were discriminated against in the workplace was because of pay, and that's why they passed the Equal Pay Act of 1963. Originally, sex was not part of or one of the protected bases under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and it was actually it was amended into the act at the very last minute in an effort to try to thwart the passage of the Civil Rights Act. That failed, and now we have protection in all employment decisions on the basis of sex. So Title VII, just another trivia question, Title VII did not apply to the federal government until 1972. It only originally applied to the private sector. In 1967, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act was passed, and that particular law protects people who are 40 or older from discrimination because of age. So, you know, those of us who are under 40, we have no protection. It also protects people, and just a kind of background, it protects people, older people versus younger people. So even if both individuals are over 40 and there's a charge of discrimination or a complaint of discrimination, just because both people are over 40 doesn't mean discrimination has not occurred. It protects older workers from being discriminated against in employment. So the next law that's up here is the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and this particular law makes it illegal to discriminate against a qualified person with a disability in the federal government. The Rehabilitation Act has the same legal standards as the Americans with Disabilities Act, so it protects people with disabilities, but in the federal government, technically the ADA does not apply because that applies to private sector and state and local governments, because essentially, 17 years before the passage of the ADA protecting people in the private sector, people in the federal government had protection from discrimination on the basis of disability. The final piece of legislation that we'll mention today and that we deal with in EEO is a relatively new statute. It's the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. It makes it illegal to discriminate against employees or applicants because of genetic information. Genetic information includes information about an individual's genetic test and the genetic test of an individual family member, as well as information about any disease, disorder, or condition of an individual family member, i.e. their family medical history. I will talk about this law not in a lot of detail, but I will discuss it a little bit in the 5-day course, and there are a number of exceptions, and I'll cover those exceptions. But this is a fairly new law. Really haven't seen any complaints raised on this basis. It'll probably apply more to the private sector than to the federal sector, but it's just something to be aware of. Okay, we have a question. Just let me read it, and I'll get back to you. Just 1 second. Okay. The question is, does the Rehab Act mean that individuals with disabilities can be selected over other candidates because of their status, as long as they are in the top 3? The Rehabilitation Act is different than Title VII or the Age Discrimination and Employment Act or GINA, in that it requires federal agencies to have an affirmative action program. Nowhere else in EEO are you going to necessarily see the term affirmative action. When we talk about EEO, we're normally talking about affirmative employment. So what the Rehabilitation Act does, to kind of address your question, is if an individual, so you could hire an individual with a disability, and if somebody without a disability files an EEO complaint alleging that we hired somebody with a disability over somebody without a disability, that person would not have a claim, would fail to state a claim in an EEO complaint, because there's no protection for an individual without a disability in the Rehab Act. So I think that it kind of addresses your question in terms of, as long as they're in the top 3, that's kind of a different issue. But the Rehab Act does allow you to hire people with disability over people with non-disability, and it'd be legal. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Okay, on to kind of the next level of information that we have in terms of the laws and guidances that we follow is the Code of Federal Regulation. On your screen, you're going to see we identify three codes, three regulations. All the regulations that we are concerned about in EEO are found in 29 CFR, and it's the 1600 kind of series, if you want to call it that. 29 CFR 1614 establishes the federal sector equal employment opportunity guidance to us. It talks about the front part of the guidance gives us the policy of the federal government in regards to equality of opportunity, and there'll be a slide on that in a second. It also gives us information on how our EEO program should be structured. And then finally, it has an extensive amount of information regarding complaints and complaint procedures. This is a document that I would say is essential reading for anybody who is an EEO specialist. And you know, if you're coming into an EEO office and you previously haven't read it, I would highly encourage you to read 29 CFR 1614. I believe, in my opinion, and some people probably disagree and probably think I'm nuts, but reading the statutes are great. You know, it gives you a good understanding. It gives you some understanding of where Congress is coming from. But the CFR is really going to get you into the nitty-gritty, really how the EEOC, who's our, you know, the enforcement agency, interprets that particular statute. So 1614 must read for anybody coming into EEO. 29 CFR 1630 are the regulations implementing the provisions of the American with Disabilities Act. You know, on the last slide, I mentioned that the ADA applies to the public sector. It doesn't directly apply to the federal sector. The Rehab Act applies to the federal sector. However, because of the Rehabilitation Act, Amendment Act of 1992, the legal standards of the ADA were incorporated into the Rehab Act. So those regulations, 29 CFR 1630, applies to the federal government because of the Rehab Amendments Act. If you are going to be working with in the disability program or working on reasonable accommodations, things of that nature, I would say that's a must-read for you as well. 29 CFR 1635 is the regulations implementing GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. Now, it's good to know, again, there's certain aspects that I think are important to know in that particular regulation. But I would say if you're going to invest some time in reading regulations, I would say 1614 and 1630. Now, the ones that we listed here is non-exhaustive list. We have in the note that additional relevant regulations can be found on the EEOC website at www.eeoc.gov. There's a lot of other regulations that you know, I would say are good things to read, especially if you're working in the complaints area, such as the guidelines on discrimination because of sex, There's also guidelines on discrimination because of religion and national religion. There's another one on national origin. So I would encourage you to read those. There's one on the Equal Pay Act. They're not very common, but if it does come up, I would encourage, if you get a Equal Pay Act or Equal Pay Act issue, I would encourage you to read 29 CFR 1620. A minute ago, I kind of just briefly described what the policy of the United States government is. 29 CFR 1614 states that it's the policy of the United States government to provide equal opportunity in employment to all persons. And that's important because sometimes there's a misperception out there about who is covered under EEO. Everybody's covered under EEO. It's we see it a lot, even in some reports that we receive, where people are saying, well, this is for EEO is for minorities and women and people with disabilities. No, EEO provides protection, and it's the policy of the United States government to provide equal opportunity in all employment for all people. There are certain bases that are protected and others are not. And that's just an aspect of what Congress has said is the federal government prohibits in regards to discrimination. So in EEO, the prohibition on discrimination in employment is on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. And it's the policy of the United States government to provide promote the full realization of equal employment opportunity through a continuing affirmative program in each agency. We will be discussing a little bit Executive Order 11478. That is, if you actually look that particular executive order up, you'll find an executive order that was issued, I want to say back in the 60s, August 8th, 1969. It's important because that tends to be the executive order that all subsequent executive orders amends and adds an additional bases to. So, if you read that one, it says it is the policy of the United States government to provide equal opportunity in federal employment to all persons, to prohibit discrimination in employment because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or age. That's one aspect of it. But then in 1998, President Clinton signed an executive order amending Executive Order 11478 to include the bases of sexual orientation. However, sexual orientation isn't one of the bases. Discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation in and of itself is not prohibited by federal law. It's an executive order. So in our EEO process, the actual bases of sexual orientation you're not going to find. It's not part of 29 CFR 1614. However, there are certain situations in which discrimination based on sexual stereotyping might come in, and the EEOC has recently, within the last year, issued a very significant case where essentially they stated that discrimination because of a person's status as a transgendered individual is discrimination on the basis of sex. So this is kind of, we have this executive order. There's no law that specifically says, it's a prohibition. No law in regards to Congress passing a law that says you can't discriminate on the basis of sex. However, sexual orientation. However, you do on sex, just to clarify. but the case law kind of adds a little bit to it. So, you know, if you have questions on that, you know, I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'm kind of getting off a little bit on a tangent. But that is something to be aware of, and we can discuss that in the 5-day if you'd like. You know, very similar to sexual orientation, there's no law, there's only executive order on status as a parent. And then genetic information was also amended into Executive Order 11478. Executive Order 13171, promote Hispanic employment in federal government. Hispanics have historically, for a number of years, a long time, had low participation rate in the federal government. And that particular executive order was designed to or promote Hispanic employment. Executive Order 13548 deals with increasing federal employment of individuals with disabilities. This was a fairly recent executive order within the last 3 years. The Department of Navy, the Department of Defense have a plan in place regarding increasing federal employment of people with disabilities. I'll discuss a little bit about that in the 5-day. Again, people with targeted disabilities, so some of the more severe disabilities, have been, we've had a low participation rate of individuals. There is a DOD and a DON goal of 2%, which is 2% of our population, people with targeted disabilities. We are currently at, I want to say, 0.63%, and we have not had, we've had a decreasing trend of people with targeted disabilities, which are the most severe disabilities. However, we have had an increasing trend of people with non-targeted disabilities, and in regards to people who have self-identified reporting having a disability, we're over 6%. We have over 13,000 people in the Department of Navy who have self-identified as having a disability. Executive Order 13583 establishes and coordinates government-wide initiatives to promote diversity and inclusion. In this particular training, we're not going to really discuss diversity and inclusion, but just to let you know, in the 5-day, we will have a module on diversity and inclusion, and we will discuss what is diversity and inclusion, what's the Navy policy on that, what's our, we'll discuss what are the differences between EEO and diversity. There is a difference, they're not the same thing. So I would encourage you to, you know, if you have any questions on that, you know, we'll discuss that in more detail in the 5-day, not necessarily in this one. We also have EEOC guidance. The EEOC, again, provides guidance to us in the form of management directives. So a Management Directive 715 addresses the Model EEO program and our reporting requirements to the EEOC. Management Directive 110 is the Federal Sector Complaint Processing Manual. That gives us guidance on how to process EEO complaints. And if you were previously in EEO and are coming back, just to let you know, Management Directive 110 was 29 CFR 1614 was recently changed. There's some changes to it, and in the near future, there's going to be a revised Management 110. So just to give you a heads up, I would say that every EEO specialist should read at least twice Management Directive 715. It really provides us information on what it means to have a model EEO program. It tells us what the elements are and talks about barrier analysis. There's a question that came in that states, are you able to tell me what the 1383 executive order is from the last slide? I think we're missing can we go back? Is it 13583? That is 13583. I'm thinking that's what it is. And that is the executive order establishing a coordinated government-wide initiative to promote diversity and inclusion in the workforce. And essentially, just to kind of that executive order talks about diversity, but it talks about diversity and equality of opportunity. You know, it's to promote a federal workplace as a model of equality of opportunity, diversity, and inclusion. And it talks about equality for all, a commitment to equal opportunity, diversity, inclusion. It talks about recruitment. Recruiting policies should try to achieve a workforce from all segments of the society, and attaining a diverse, qualified workforce, and that attaining a diverse and qualified workforce is one of the cornerstones of the merit-based civil service. This is going to be there's diversity, again, is something that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the 5-day course. It's getting a lot of attention. It's going to be more. We're going to be doing more work in diversity within the EEO offices in the future. It's got a lot of high-level attention. There's an executive diversity advisory council that reports to the under and to Mr. Garcia, the Assistant Secretary for Manpower Reserve Affairs. Ms. Adams, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Civilian and Human Resources, is the chair. You know, DOD is coming out with a plan. You know, there's a lot of things that are going on in that area, and at this point, you know, there's still a lot of things kind of being worked out in that area, but you know, we will have, you know, we'll talk about the diversity statement in the 5-day course, and we'll have slides on, you know, the differences. But right now, we just kind of wanted to mention that. So stay tuned. If you do have questions, you know, please feel free to, you know, give me a call and we can discuss. Back to the EEOC guidance slide. Again, I can't emphasize enough that if you're going to be an EEO specialist and you haven't read MD 715, you need to read MD 715. Not only MD 715, but also instructions to the federal agencies on MD 715. And then I would advise you to read it again, because you're always going to find something new in it when you read it again. Depending on what area of EEO you're working in, there's likely to be an enforcement guidance, and there's likely to be more than one enforcement guidance. The EEOC really likes to issue enforcement guidance, and there's just a large number of enforcement guidance out there. There's stuff on reasonable accommodation. There's enforcement guidance on sexual harassment. There's an enforcement guidance on race discrimination, national origin discrimination. There's just a lot out there, and I encourage you, you know, to go out to the EEOC website and see what's out there. And trust me, there's so much stuff that you could read to really help you in your job as an EEO specialist. Also, EEOC issues case law, and I would encourage you to at least become familiar with that. And we'll talk a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about that in the 5-day course. When we did this live, you know, I did talk a little bit about it. There's different resources that we have available to us to extract case law and do searches, such as Westlaw. There's CyberFeds. Some of you might be familiar with CyberFeds. And I would encourage you to try to stay up to date on the case law. There's a lot of interesting stuff that comes out. And just one thing that I do want to say about case law is the case law that we are concerned about is EEOC case law, and case law comes out of the Supreme Court. District courts, other federal courts might issue cases, but they're not necessarily binding on us. Case law elaborates, gives us a lot of information that's good that we should know as EEO specialists. And of course, we have non-EEO policies. We have the CHARM, the Civilian Human Resources Manual, subchapter 1601, which outlines the EEO program policy for the Department of Navy and provides the policy and the responsibilities of various people at different levels in the organization, from the SecNav down to employees. Subchapter 1603 is the CHARM on EEO program assessment, and in that CHARM we talk about assessing EEO programs at various levels and by different entities such as the Major Command, assessing the EEO program of a field activity, things of that nature. Subchapter 1604 is our guidance on barrier analysis. In the 5-day course, you're going to go through the Department of Navy barrier analysis training, which is very good. Virgil and Judy Canavan actually provided barrier analysis training to the Air Force. Okay, the question is, what is barrier analysis? Barrier analysis is the process by which the agency, not necessarily just people in the EEO office, because we need help from other areas to do a barrier analysis. But a barrier analysis, essentially, we look at our data, we look for indicators that potentially a policy, procedure, or practice is inhibiting equality of opportunity. So we'll look at workforce data. You can look at complaint data. You look at comments that people raise to see if there's a trigger, and a trigger is just a red flag for us. So, for example, if you have a low participation rate in a particular group, let's say Hispanic males or Hispanic females, the low participation is a trigger, and then we will subsequently, go in and try to determine, is there a barrier? And there's different methods of doing that. So essentially, that's what barrier is. We're looking for barriers of equality of opportunity in the form of a policy, practice, or procedure. There was a question in regards to, is the 2010 CLF data available for us to use? The 2010 CLF data is available, and I don't know. I'm going to pass it to Virgil. He's the one who's doing that.
Good afternoon. This is Virgil. The question about the 2010 CLF. It is available. However, we're waiting, along with the rest of the federal government, for guidance and the parameters from the EEOC on how we will utilize that data. So we have access to it, but our reality right now is we continue to use the 2000 CLF until we get some guidance and instruction from the EEOC on how the EEOC wants us to do this. Hopefully that answers the question.
But it is available on the census website, but just waiting. I hope I kind of very, not yell in the microphone, is that me or Virgil? I hope I kind of very generally explain what barrier analysis is, but essentially barrier analysis is the process by which we look at to see if there are employment barriers in the form of a policy, practice, procedure that prohibits equality of opportunity. So subchapter 1606, which is on reasonable accommodation, gives the Department of Navy's reasonable accommodation policy and responsibilities. And we don't have it up here, but there's also a guide to processing reasonable accommodation requests, which go through our policies and our procedures. We have subchapter 1613, which deals with the notification of Federal Employee Anti-Discrimination and Retaliation Act of 2002, commonly known as the No Fear Act. And the No Fear Act the No Fear Act really didn't create any substantive law. It just mostly requires us to provide training to our employees on EEO, whistleblower, things of that nature, and then we have reporting requirements every year. Subchapter 1614.1 is the Department of Navy policy on discrimination complaints. And again, it gives what our policy is and the roles and responsibilities. There is also a Department of Navy complaints processing manual that you'd want to read in tandem with the CHARM, and that goes through the reasonable accommodate the complaint process in more detail, and kind of gives you how you as a EEO specialist in the Department of Navy must process EEO complaints. Finally, at the bottom, there's guidance and advisory memorandums. The one we issued recently is GAMS number 86, which dealt with the reassignment as a reasonable accommodation process. There's a number of GAMS. I would highly encourage you, if you haven't done so, to get an account for our internal portal. All of the GAMS and subchapters of the Civilian Human Resource Manual and other important documents are going to be on the portal, and we're going to really use that in the future as a resource to communicate with our practitioners and disseminate information. So if you haven't done so, please get an account for our internal portal, and you'll have access to all this information. I would encourage you all to read all the subchapters. As an EO specialist in the Department of Navy, it's important that you have an understanding of the Department of Navy's interpretation of some of the guidance that we have from higher authority and how to process complaints and reasonable accommodations in the Department of Navy. So the EO program policy in the Department of Navy here, in the next couple of slides, we're just giving you information on the Department of Navy policy. Okay, and this is straight out of 1601. And our policy is to ensure EO is fully integrated into the Department of Navy mission with demonstrated commitment from leadership at all levels. This aspect is important, need leadership commitment, and they need to cascade that down to all employees. Virgil will talk a little bit about this in the next module, the next segment, regarding the 6 essential elements of a model EO program. Again, very similar to the government, the U.S. government policy, our policy is to provide equal opportunity employment for all employees and applicants through clearly defined HR and EO policy and programs. Again, like the EO, like the federal policy, it's the Department of Navy policy to prohibit and proactively prevent discrimination in employment because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability. 1601 was issued prior to GINA. However, just because we don't have it up there doesn't mean it's not our policy to prohibit discrimination on genetic information as well. And again, there is a prohibition, it's Department of Navy policy to prohibit discrimination or reprisal against persons because they have either participated in any manner in the EEO process or because they have opposed something made unlawful under any of the EEO statutes. It's also our policy to ensure that managers and supervisors share responsibility with EEO HR personnel for successful policy program implementation. The EEO program belongs to the commands. We in the EEO office have, we provide advice and guidance. We, process reasonable accommodation requests. We give advice on how to process those. We process complaints. We work with the command, and we work with managers and supervisors on implementing a model EEO program. The program belongs to the command. Supervisors and managers are the ones who are making the decisions that impact equality of opportunity in the Department of the Navy. So managers and supervisors, have a large responsibility in this program, and we work very closely with our managers and supervisors on a lot of issues to ensure that we do provide equality of opportunity for our employees. Also, Department of Navy policy to promote the full realization of equal employment opportunity through a continuing affirmative program that are efficient, responsive, and legally compliant. In the Department of Navy, we have a continuous program. We work every day to try to ensure equality of opportunity for our employees. And it's not something that we do occasionally, it's something that we do all the time. And it's as EEO specialists, we constantly monitor, our workforce, constantly doing our barrier analysis to ensure that we try to eliminate barriers if we identify them. So that, in a nutshell, is the Department of Navy policy for EEO. So now great. Those are very good answers, and a lot of them had to do with how to providing good service to our customers, understanding the law and the regulations and our guidance. I agree with what most of you have stated up there. And I would say this about the law, and I kind of hinted at it before. We in the EO office, we in the Department of Navy as EO specialist, uh, we follow the law according to the Supreme Court and the EOC. Um, not the law according to like Ed or anybody else. So you guys missed. Virgil just said, "Thank God for that." Um, and you're absolutely right. You're all absolutely right. You need to know the law because it's the foundation on what we build the rest of the EO program on, and without having a clear understanding of what the law, what our regulations, we can't do our jobs. And so, thank you all for participating in this question. And now we will take a 15-minute break. So we'll restart at 14:20, 21, somewhere in between. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Can you please let me know if I'm yelling again? I'm trying very hard not to. Actually, this is something to get used to. So I'm not trying to yell at you. I'm just trying to make sure that you hear me clearly and we can have this discussion. So hopefully um, I'm at the appropriate level with the volume. Okay, to finish up this afternoon, what we're going to do is we're going to describe the 6 essential elements of a Model EEO program. And before we get into the meat of what these six essential elements are, just wanted to give you a quick overview about the six essential elements. This is the piece where it lays out the basic elements necessary to create and maintain a model EEO program. And that's the major piece of what the 6 essential elements are. And it's derived out of Management Directive 715, which of course you've already heard Ed talk about, which is the policy and the guidance provided by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And MD 715 also provides a roadmap for creating effective equal employment opportunity programs for all employees. So essentially what this means to you is that MD 715, the 6 essential elements of a model EEO program in particular, is the foundation as that roadmap lays out, the foundation for what EEO programs should look like. Is what's considered to be the minimum that an organization would need to do to ensure that it has a compliant EEO program. What you see on the screen now is the 6 essential elements of Model EEO program. I got to tell you all, I learned this from Ed Cassian, and I think it's pretty neat. And the best way to go about remembering the 6 essential elements of a Model EEO program, if you're new to this, is the acronym DIPER. And of course, we have people who like it, maybe some don't like it, but it is an easy way to remember it. The 6 essential elements. And of course, you can see it up on the screen. I'm going to talk about each and every one of them separately, describing what it is, what it means, and what you should be looking for so that you understand what, from a bare minimum perspective, a model EEO program should look like. We're going to start with the first element, which is demonstrated commitment. Now, this is where the leadership of an organization displays commitment to the EEO program, and this is done by policy statements that govern policy statements that are enforceable and govern the way the program should be. For example, there should be written policy statements in every one of our commands that lays out the principles of EEO. The EEO officer, who is like the EEO commander, his or her stance on the program and on the principles and what you can expect as employees out of the EEO program. So at a minimum, you should see in the commands policy statements, not only on the EEO policy, but also on sexual harassment, anti-harassment, and there may be a number of other policies. But when you're looking for demonstrated commitment by leadership, you're looking from that perspective. You're also looking to see within a command if things are being done to ensure that every employee is informed on what is available in the program. In other words, how does all the employees know what's happening within the EEO program or what's available or what the EEO policy is? That's determined on utilizing all the necessary media that you have. You'll find it on internets, hard copy form, or whatever media technology that a command would like to use. But the reality is that all that information, as it pertains to policies, should be distributed among all employees, and they should know exactly what it is that leadership expects out of them and out of the EEO program. The other one is, the next one is integration of EEO into the strategic mission. Now, excuse me, there's a number of things that we would look for when we're looking at the bare minimum of an EEO program that displays that the equal employment opportunity is in fact integrated into the mission. One of the things is sufficient resources. Does the command have or is the command allocating enough resources within the EEO program to ensure that it is maintained in accordance with Title VII and the Rehab Act? Also, what we look for is to ensure that EEO is involved in critical workplace decisions. For example, if there's going to be some major shift or major change in human capital, such as a lot of hiring, or maybe even there's a lot of things going on right now with us within the Department of Navy. And the question is EEO at the table and providing critical information as these decisions are being made, such as this, what we're doing right now, the transition to the new service delivery model. We are going to establish, as you well know, new EEO offices. We're shifting employees around. Things are happening, and the question is EEO at the table, ensuring that certain things are thought of as decisions are being made. Another thing that we in particular look for is does the EEO program personnel have regular access to senior staff? And that may necessarily be the EEO specialists working within the program. It may necessarily be the EEO leaders working within the program. But the question remains: is there access? We also want to ensure that once again, EEO program personnel are participating in meetings where critical decisions are being made that would have an impact on human capital. And then also recruiting, hiring, and developing managers and supervisors. It is pretty key to ensuring that from that perspective that they have the effective managerial and communication skills to include interpersonal skills to manage the workforce in appropriate fashion and making appropriate decisions. So we look for training. Is training being provided for our leadership personnel, our managers and supervisors, to ensure that they have those necessary skills to manage the workforce appropriately. And then you have the accountability piece of the essential elements of a model EEO program. And this is pretty important as well, because this is how you manage the program. How do we stop and ensure that we take regular audits of the program? As we'll talk a lot more detail about this when we get to the 5-day training course, but at least at a minimum on an annual basis, we stop and we take a look at the program to ensure that the program is compliant. And we look at the program from so many different perspectives to ensure that the affirmative employment program is working appropriately and all the other components of the program. We take time to make sure that we have procedures that prevent all forms of discrimination. First of all, we want to be proactive in our approach of providing equality of opportunity more so than reactive, because of course the reactive piece of this is dealing with EEO complaints, processing EEO complaints. The accountability piece also requires evaluation of manager and supervisor performance as it relates to equality of opportunity. And one of the things we try to determine is across the Department of Navy, are there elements in manager and supervisor's performance appraisals that point towards their role and responsibility in ensuring equality of opportunity. And then also ensuring that our personnel policies, procedures, the conduct and training systems are clearly defined and applied consistently and implemented fairly. And we do that through taking a hard look at how we do certain things within the organization. If you recall in the beginning of this, we talked a little bit about the employment cycle, the life cycle of employment. I think Ed showed you all the wheel from recruitment all the way around to leaving employment, may it be through retirement or going to a different job. The question is what policies, how do our policies and procedures impact employees in each phase of that employment cycle? And we take a hard look at that, and we assure that proactively that we're preventing discrimination by ensuring that there is equality of opportunity in each phase of that cycle. And then along with the accountability piece of the essential elements, once again, implementing effective reasonable accommodation procedures. You heard Ed talk a little bit about that, but we take a hard look to ensure that we do that. We have policies across the Department of the Navy that tells us how we should be processing requests for reasonable accommodations. The question is are we adhering to those policies, and are those policies fair across the board? We also are make sure that we're mindful of the disability program obligations. What is management supervisors' role in the disability program and ensuring the equality of opportunity? We look for all of those things to ensure that managers, supervisors, EEO program officials, and HR personnel are being held accountable for the program and the execution of the program. We review the findings of discrimination to determine if there are issues where we need to address either through policy or through changes in practice to ensure that we're providing equality of opportunity, and then also finally making sure that we comply with settlement agreements. And then we have the proactive prevention piece of the Model EEO program, the essential element. And this is where we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to prevent unlawful discrimination. And the way that we go about doing this is conducting annual self-assessments. And we monitor our progress. We take a hard look at ourselves. We identify barriers where they exist. We develop plans to eliminate those barriers. We develop strategic plans to eliminate barriers. And this is an ongoing effort. This is another piece of the program that we're going to really talk in great detail when we get to the 5-day course. However, here we just want to be able to describe it so that you know what it is. And then also underneath proactive prevention, we have an element of understanding the anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies. And I think you all summed it up when you talked a little bit about understanding the law and how that helps you as an EEO specialist. Well, it's the same here in helping you understand what should the anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies say. What should be in it? How do we utilize it? How do we enforce it? All of that information comes from understanding the law. And then we have efficiency as part of the 6 essential elements. And this is the part of the program where we're ensuring that we have a fair and equitable complaint process that is accessible to all employees. We want to make sure that we encourage the use of alternative dispute resolution to resolve disputes where they arise for a number of reasons. But for me particularly, the most important reason is that we can get things resolved in a fair and equitable and expeditious manner. We can get people back to work working on whatever missions that they have before them. And then also we have we take a look at identifying and monitoring trends reflected in the complaint processing. And we utilize that information, like I said before, in many different ways to maybe change policy, maybe change the way that we do things. It may impact instructions locally or maybe even Department of Navy-wide. But the only way that we can find that out is by monitoring and analyzing trends as it pertains to complaints and how complaints are processed, as well as ensuring that we're processing complaints as established through the timelines established by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And we'll talk a lot more about that also when we get to the 5-day course in which the complaint process and complaint processing will be broken down so that you clearly understand what your role in that might be. And then finally, employing adequate and accurate information systems. We have a number of what we call e-tools that we use to execute the EEO program. Things such as eVersity, which is a tool that we utilize to do our self-assessments and audits and report on those audits across the Department of Navy. We also have iComplaints, in which we maintain information and we collect information to analyze to ensure that we are processing complaints in accordance with the MD 110 that you heard Ed Cassian talk about earlier. And there's a number of other systems that we use. Well, we don't have them out yet. I don't know if I even should bring it up because it's going to generate a lot of questions for Ed Cassian. But there's another tool, an e-tool called, well, I don't want to use the acronym. So it's the Reasonable Accommodation Tracker. If you take the first letter from each one of those, you'll understand why I didn't use that acronym. However, that's the system that we will begin using to ensure that we are processing requests for reasonable accommodation in accordance with Department of Navy policy as well as all others. We also have applicant flow system, an e-tool, in which we will begin using this fiscal year that will help us collect information that will assist us in our barrier analysis efforts. So we have a number of things that are tools that we use to ensure that we have the data necessary to not only just execute the EEO program, but also to analyze and assess the program to ensure that we have a compliant, viable, and useful program. And also underneath efficiency, we want to make sure that we're using, well, I already talked about the complaint tracking monitoring system. I already talked about some delayed data collection that we use, such as eVersity, as well as applicant flow data. And we also try to identify best practices in being able to communicate the program and how we gather data, how we use data. Because there's all kinds of, actually some of the other major commands have their own tools that they use in conjunction with the tools that we provide at the Department of Navy. So there are some best practices out there. And then the last essential element, which would be responsiveness, where we ensure that we fully comply with the law. If there's a finding of discrimination, and we receive orders from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. We want to make sure that we fully comply. And if we don't fully comply, we want to make sure that we're following the rules of engagement as is laid out in MD 110 and other references on how we may appeal those decisions, however, but we follow it, or what we should be doing is following it in appropriate fashion, and we engage ourselves, we look at ourselves internally to make sure that we're doing that, and make sure that we have the type of program that ensures compliance with laws. We also have ensuring that we have reporting procedures in place to make sure that we report information to the EEOC in a timely fashion. And that's one of the areas, and I guess we'll talk about this probably a little bit more in detail when we do the 5-day course and we talk about complaints management and complaint processing. But that's one of those areas that sometimes gets us in trouble when we're not providing information to the EEOC as requested. We want to make sure as an agency, as an organization, at every level of the organization, that we're responsive to the Commission as it pertains to orders and findings of discrimination or any other issues that come out of the EEOC. We're responsive to EEOC directives, ensuring that we comply with directives and any other guidance and enforcement information that comes out of the EEOC. But to look at ourselves internally, we want to make sure that our subordinate commands, for our major commands down to our activity levels, are responsive to the Department of Navy when Okay, it appears that there aren't any questions, so we're going to continue on with the presentation. Right now, I need you to answer this question. Wait a minute. Looks like, do we have a question? Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to hold off for a second. Looks like we have a question. The question is, will applicant flow data be addressed in the 5-day sessions? Yes, we're going to talk about in the barrier analysis piece of the 5-day course. We're going to teach you all how to conduct the barrier analysis, but along with that, we have to talk about the necessary data that you need to be able to do barrier analysis, and applicant flow data is a part of that process. Applicant flow data is going to we've had a long road getting to gaining access to applicant flow data, and we're finally there. We're at the window. We're going to have this information, so we'll be able to put that information on the table on where it comes from and how to use it. So to answer that question, hopefully yes, we'll be addressing that at the 5-day session. Okay, now if you would, could you answer that question? Why did the committee chat window, and then we'll talk about it after you're done. We'll take about a minute or two to do that. Okay, if you're still typing, you can go right ahead. I've read the majority of everything that has already been typed, and I agree with the majority of you. The reality of the 6 essential elements and why the commission established it. Once again, as we began to talk about this, is to set the foundation for what, at a bare minimum, a compliant EEO program would look like. It would have all of those elements within it to ensure that it complies with Commission guidance, comply with very specifically with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So I agree with you all. what I want to do right now before we go any further with the presentation is to go to the questions because there was I want to make sure that we answered all the questions that you all had. And I think the one question that we haven't answered up to this point was, I think, do we get data on minorities and females from Eversity? The answer to that is yes. When we release access to Eversity to all of the commands, it will have the MD 715 tables that reflect the raw data and percentage data on minorities. As you put it here, basically it would be gender and ethnicity, and then also disability information.
Just to clarify, to answer that question, Eversity will provide data on all employees by race, ethnicity, and gender and disability status.
Hopefully that answers the question. And we're going to keep with the presentation. How well do you know EEO? What I need for you to do, oh, I'm sorry, we have another question. When do we get Eversity data? What do we use until you provide it? We will be talking to the Command Deputy EEO officers regarding Eversity data and when it's going to be provided. Your Command Deputy EEO officers will then, of course, cascade that information down to you. Hopefully that answers that question. I can't give you a specific date right now because we need to have that discussion with the Command Deputies. Hello, everybody. This is Virgil. I'm back again. Hey, we're looking at the results of the test. How well you know EEO, and I got to give a shout out to PJ Humphreys, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Shanae or Shania Peterson. The both of them got 100s. Wonderful. That's exciting. And a number of people scored in the 90 percentile. And the area where it seems that there may have been some hiccups is not a big issue, because what we really hope that you walk away with this from this DCO is understanding that the federal statutes and CFRs and executive orders exist. We really don't expect you to memorize that now or even ever. But if you work in the program long enough, that you're going to probably memorize them. But the key thing is knowing where to go get them. And the majority of the information you need to do your job can be found, the reference material can be found on the EEOC website, as well as our site here at the at OCHR. And having said that, great job, everybody, because nobody's a failure in this deal. You all did well. So looking back on what we did today, we defined EEO, and we talked about the basic statutes, regulations, policies, and where you can find them, and the importance on reading some of them and ensuring you understand what's in them. We described the 6 essential elements of a model EEO program. Once again, this is another opportunity to ask questions if you have them. And if you have them, go ahead and type them. And I just want to let you know that the next DCO is on the 19th of February from 1300 to 1500. And if you recall in the very beginning, what we will be talking about in that DCO on the 19th is give me a sec. I'm trying to pull up the learning objectives. On the 19th, we'll be talking about we'll explain the mission of the DON EEO program. We will describe the components that comprise the DON EEO program, and that'll be it for that DCO coming up on the 19th from 1300 to 1500. I don't see where anybody's asked any other questions. So that being said, okay. So what I need for you to do right now is I need you to click down at the bottom there where it says click here for DCO1 evaluation. And then I need you to do the poll to let us know that you finished the course evaluation. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want you to go yet. We have two significant things for you to do. It won't take you very long to do. One is to complete the evaluation, which you should be doing right now. And after you do that, we're going to go to the next slide. And the next slide is where you're going to fill in the information for your attendance so you get credit for having done this. So please don't sign off yet until you complete both tasks.
Also, if when you complete your attendance, there are some people who logged on to the DCO as a group or as a team. Please complete the attendance separately so we have a proper allocation of everybody who has attended to get credit for this course. Thank you. Okay, just for clarification, even though this is not the makeup course, please complete the evaluation and the attendance. And again, if you're working as a team or if you're in, multiple people logged on to one computer, please have each individual complete the attendance to ensure that we have an accurate number of who attended this session. I was asked if you completed the evaluation, completed the survey, if you could sign off, and the answer is yes. Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to next week. Thank you.